Election night in America once again as primary voters in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Connecticut, and Vermont, where polls have closed, and we can now report that Senator Bernie Sanders has won the Democratic primary for the state of Vermont, which presumably is not breaking news for my next guest, the independent senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders. Congratulations on your victory.
Thank you very much.
It was a nail biter. I think you got 94% of the vote.
Something like that.
So this is one of those instances where you won the Democratic primary, but you don't run as a Democrat.
Right. I have a long and kind of an unusual relationship with the people of the state of Vermont. Back in 1981, I defeated a Democrat and a Republican to become mayor of Burlington, defeated Democrats and Republicans. To make a long story short, I've always run as an independent. And that's what I will do, and I think people of Vermont understand that. We have a very good relationship with the Democratic Party. I suspect in this coming campaign we'll be putting more money, our campaign will be putting more money into the Vermont Democratic Party than anybody else. We're supporting a whole lot of good Democratic candidates, but I will run.
So you will decline the Democratic nomination?
Yes.
And I understand that you've got a good relationship with the voters of Vermont, but now you've got a profile nationally where a lot of Democrats are saying, hey, this is not a good time for Bernie Sanders to be separate and apart from the Democratic Party.
I'm not separate and apart. I'm part of the Democratic leadership. The truth of the matter is, and I think Democrats and Republicans have got to understand this, there are more people now who are independents than Democrats or Republicans. I don't want to break the bad news to anybody. Two-party system is not held in wide esteem in this country. And I think as an independent, what I can do and am doing is bringing a whole lot of working people and young people who are not crazy about the Democratic Party into the Democratic Party, because clearly that is a far better alternative than the Republican Party. And what we're also trying to do is reform the Democratic Party. Make it a party of working people, make it a party of young people. And I'm very proud of the successes that we've had in recent years in pushing a progressive agenda, health care for all, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, making public colleges and universities tuition free, demanding the wealthy start paying their fair share of taxes. Those ideas, Ali, which a few years ago seemed to be radical ideas, are now kind of mainstream ideas, supported by a pretty strong majority of the American people.
So take a look at this tweet today from Nate Silver of 538. In races where insurgent progressive Democrats are running against party-backed nominees, and we're going to get in trouble for all the words we used here, but the establishment Democrat is winning 89% of the time. We can get into debates about what that means, but...
It doesn't mean anything, is what we could talk about. Next question is, how much money do the establishment Democrats have compared to the insurgents? Look, we are winning, I believe, the ideological struggle. You agree? Okay. In other words, ideas that were seen radical are now seeming mainstream. Are we going to win every election? Of course not. There are a lot of really great candidates who have lost, but the truth of the matter is, if you look at races from the school board, state legislature, city council, members of Congress, we are winning some really good races.
In this instance, in this time that we're at now, with Donald Trump as president, with remarkable destruction, not creative destruction, but this destruction, is the winning of the longer-term battle of mainstreaming some of your ideas in the Democratic Party better or more important than the shorter-term goal?
Donald Trump has got to be defeated, and I intend to do everything that I can with every other progressive in America, making sure that that happens. You will recall, though, that 4 years ago in the midterm elections, we had the lowest voter turnout in the modern history of the United States of America. 2/3 of the American people didn't vote.
It's in the low 30s.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So our job right now, and I think we are succeeding, is getting people excited about the political process, getting people to run for office, getting people to vote. If we can have a large voter turnout, if we have candidates who stand for working families, I think the Democrats are going to do just fine.
So the complaints of many working Americans or formerly working Americans who supported you was not dissimilar to a lot of those who support Donald Trump. The distrust of the political system, of Wall Street, of the banks, of trade agreements that have left them out while corporations made record profits and countries had record GDP growth. They're many of the same people. How do Democrats get those voters back?
You talk to the issues that impact ordinary Americans, and we demand that the media, by the way, talks to those issues as well. I know you're familiar with this issue. You're Canadian, yeah? Why is it that the United States of America is the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people, and yet we're spending twice as much per capita, and our health care outcomes are worse? Let's talk
So
about
you've
that issue.
pushed the idea of Medicare for All, which is a similar system to what I grew up under. Is that the winning strategy for
I
Democrats?
think it's part of it. It's not just one thing. Raising the minimum wage to a living wage. Dealing with income and wealth inequality. How do you think the American people feel? Whether they're working people, middle class, upper middle class. You got 3 people in this country owning more wealth than the bottom 50%. You got one guy, Jeff Bezos, whose wealth increases every single day by $250 million, but he doesn't pay his workers, many of his workers, enough money to keep them off food stamps and Medicaid. Do you think that's an issue that would
practically
resonate?
speaking, why does Donald Trump still have that base of support, in many cases of people who do not benefit from his policies?
Well, I think we have got to do a heck of a lot of better in getting through to some of those people. Look, I'm not going to deny for a second that some of those supporters are racist, sexist, homophobes, xenophobes. That's true. I don't believe that is the majority. I've been all over Trump country. And I think what Trump was able to do is pick up on the failures of the Democratic Party that did not talk about the fact that hardworking, decent people saw their jobs going to Mexico or China, or people cannot afford to send their kids to college or afford childcare or afford housing that they desperately need. So I think the future of the Democratic Party has got to be to focus on the needs of working families, to demand that we have a government that represents all of us. You talk to Republicans and ask them how they feel about Citizens United. Do they think it's a good idea that billionaires like the Koch brothers can literally buy elections, spending hundreds of millions of dollars? They don't.
So at this point, the Democrats have got to get out there with a message, and we're 84 days from the midterms. You've been crossing the country campaigning for people. At some point, it'll start to emerge as to what should the party represent in the next election. Who will the leaders be? There are a number of Democratic Socialist candidates who have run. There are a lot of progressive Democrats who are running. And there are, again, back to this Nate Silver tweet, whether
and
they
by the way,
they're
that
back,
is such that is a troublesome tweet. Because I can't predict, I could back 100% of the victims.
Let's just put that up for a second. I just want to see it. The fact is the number troublesome to you? Because 89% of what he is calling establishment Democrats are winning these primaries.
Yeah, and probably half of them ran without any opposition. I mean, it doesn't mean anything unto itself. Because the truth is that all over this country, we are seeing working people and young people often for the very first time getting involved in politics.
So in some of these rural, more conservative constituencies, you think it's good to get in there with a consistent message of a progressive message, not to outflank a conservative candidate? Because the ones who've been winning in some of these special elections are people who
really, I didn't know
like
that was
Republicans.
Alexandria's situation here in New York. I don't know that was.
And you've drawn the clearest example of the exception to that rule.
Or Rashidi's victory, or John Fetterman's victory in Pennsylvania.
But you know, you get the point, right? There are some.
Look, people are going to run their own campaigns based on their own district. All that I can say is that I think it is not only good policy, it is good politics to talk about issues of relevance to working people. And all of the polling, you ask people, do they support Medicare for all? Yeah. Do they think that the rich and large corporations should start paying their fair share of taxes? Yeah, they do. Should we make public colleges and universities tuition free? Hey, that's a great idea. Should we deal with climate change and transform our energy system? Yeah, let's do it, because we're seeing what climate change is doing right now all over the world.
And yet we've moved in the opposite direction on all 4 of those things.
We sure have.
We've gone the wrong way. Congratulations on your victory.
Thank you.
Look forward to talking to you more.
Okay.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.